Long before China became a single nation, it was a land permanently at war. By the 3rd century BCE, the old Zhou dynasty had collapsed into weakness, leaving behind a fractured world of rival states. For generations, kingdoms fought without end. Alliances shattered, cities rose and fell. No ruler could bring lasting peace, only temporary survival. Among these warring states was Qin, a harsh border kingdom located in what is now Shanxi province. To its rivals, Qin was seen as backward, too strict, too militarized, too slow to adopt elite customs. Even the Zhou court once dismissed Qin as semi-barbaric. But Qin possessed something far more dangerous than refinement. It had discipline, and discipline would change history. Decades before Qin Shi Huang was born, the foundations of empire were already being laid. During the reign of Duke Xiao of Qin, a reformer named Shang Yang rose to power. He did not believe society should be ruled by noble birth. He believed it should be ruled by law, absolute, impersonal, and unforgiving. Shang Yang tore apart the old social order. Land was granted not to aristocrats, but to soldiers who proved themselves in battle. Peasants became warriors. Warriors became the backbone of the state. Qin's army transformed into a massive, disciplined infantry force, cheaper, larger, and deadlier than the chariot armies of rival kingdoms. The Qin state became a machine. Ironically, Shang Yang himself would not survive the system he created. After Duke Xiao's death, rival nobles accused him of treason. He was executed brutally in public, but his ideas lived on, and Qin continued to sharpen itself into a weapon. In 259 BCE, during the height of the warring states' chaos, a boy named Ying Zheng was born into the ruling house of Qin. He was not born into safety. His early life was shaped by political danger, suspicion, and constant threats. When his father, King Xuansheng, died suddenly after a short reign, Ying Zheng inherited the throne at just 13 years old. He was a king surrounded by enemies inside and outside the palace. Regents ruled in his name. Assassins lurked in the shadows. Court factions schemed endlessly. The boy watched and remembered. As Ying Zheng grew older, he began to move. One by one, regents were removed. Rivals were exiled. Conspirators were executed. Historical records suggest palace intrigue and political maneuvering were part of Ying Zheng's rise, though some details are disputed. What is clear is that he successfully consolidated power. By his early 20s, Ying Zheng ruled Qin alone, and he had no intention of sharing power. Instead of diplomacy, he chose annihilation. Instead of balance, he chose finality. The long war to end all wars had begun. Beginning in 230 BCE, Qin armies surged outward. This was not chaotic warfare, it was methodical destruction. One rival state fell, then another. Qin generals advanced relentlessly, absorbing territory, relocating populations, and erasing borders. Han fell, Zhao collapsed. Wei was crushed. Chu fought back, but ended up getting wrecked. Yan followed. Qi stood alone and surrendered. In 221 BCE, the last rival kingdom vanished. For the first time in history, China was unified under a single ruler. Ying Zheng discarded the title of king. He named himself Qin Shi Huang, first emperor of Qin, not first among equals. Unity, Qin Shi Huang believed, could not be trusted to survive on its own, so he enforced it. The feudal system was abolished. Noble families lost hereditary authority. Officials were appointed by the state, loyal only to the emperor. Across the empire, everything was standardized. Written script, currency, weights and measures, laws and punishments. Roads spread across the land, connecting distant regions to the capital at Xianyang. Massive highways carried troops, officials, and supplies. China was no longer a collection of cultures. It was a system, and Qin Shi Huang stood at its center. To defend the empire's northern frontier, Qin Shi Huang ordered the linking of existing border walls. Hundreds of thousands of laborers were conscripted to build what would later evolve into the Great Wall of China. Roads followed, thousands of miles of them, including the straight road, cutting through mountains to transport supplies and soldiers. This was engineering on a continental scale, and it came at a human cost measured in exhaustion, suffering, and death. The empire was strong and silent. Qin Shi Huang ruled through legalism, absolute law, absolute punishment. Criticism became dangerous. Philosophical texts that challenged imperial authority were restricted or controlled, and historical accounts suggest some books were lost. Scholars who opposed the regime faced punishment. At the same time, the emperor became obsessed with immortality. Alchemists promised eternal life. Secret journeys were made. Elixirs were consumed, some likely poisoned with mercury. The ruler who controlled everything feared one thing above all else: death. Even as he ruled the living, Qin Shi Huang prepared for eternity. Near Mount Lei, an underground city took shape: vast halls, palaces, rivers, and armies buried beneath the earth. Thousands of life-sized terracotta soldiers were created, each with a unique face. Generals, infantry, cavalry, all frozen in silent formation. Ancient records describe rivers of mercury inside the tomb, and modern studies have found elevated mercury levels. Though exact details remain uncertain, the tomb was sealed. An empire prepared to rule beyond death. In 210 BCE, while traveling through eastern China, Qin Shi Huang died suddenly. His officials panicked. To prevent rebellion, they concealed his death, transporting his body alongside carts of fish to mask the smell. A forged decree instructed the crown prince to die by imperial order. The empire passed to a weaker heir, and immediately cracks appeared. Within 2 years, revolt swept the land. The Qin Dynasty collapsed under its own weight. Warlords rose. Xianyang burned. The first emperor's empire vanished almost as quickly as it had formed, but unity did not. From the ashes rose the Han Dynasty, which preserved Qin institutions, Qin administration, and Qin vision. China would never fracture the same way again. Qin Shi Huang ruled briefly, but he forced history to move in only one direction: forward.